Things kick off immediately with Gaban saving Luffy, who is still alive even after being impaled by two of Imu's founding weapons. However, Luffy wills himself to heal from this damage. This is the first time Luffy has ever healed himself, yet it could also be the second. In the Wano arc, after Kaido killed Luffy, his Devil Fruit awakening somehow brought him back to life. The manga never explained how this happened, but this latest chapter might have given the answer. When Luffy died, Gear 5's healing ability may have activated. The fruit didn't just revive him, it patched him up enough to keep fighting Kaido, even though Luffy had said before he died that he could only manage one more attack. Devil fruits that heal the user have been around in One Piece for years, but fruits that work after the user has deceased are something much stranger. Yet there are fruits in the story that have been said to work exactly like this. But there are even cases other than Luffy of devil fruits returning their users back to life. Brook's fruit has now been revealed to have saved him from death on 2 separate occasions. But there is an even older scene in Skypiea when Enel had his heart stopped by Whitebeard's recheck dial, only for the lightning fruit to activate and return Enel to life. Almost exactly like what happened at Wano to Luffy. Powers persisting after death is becoming a bit of a pattern in One Piece. This was always something present in the story, but it is now happening more and more frequently in the final saga. It could be that the story is building up to something big with all of these cases. If you're interested, you should watch this video to know why this could all be leading up to the story finally giving an answer as to why Blackbeard is the only character with 2 devil fruits. Despite this otherworldly display of resilience by Luffy in the chapter, Gaban is however not impressed with him. Gaban says that Luffy's awakening and his title of Emperor are nothing compared to being a true pirate king, and that Luffy still got a long way to go if he still needs to be saved by an injured old man. Gaban has for decades seen even the mightiest pirates try to surpass Roger but fail, so his words are understandable, but Gaban in this scene is probably only pretending to be this critical of Luffy. Imu is a foe Gaban himself acknowledged that even the Roger pirates never had to face. Gaban also personally had to rescue Roger multiple times from lesser threats than this, so his criticism of this being something unbefitting a pirate king isn't exactly accurate. The reason Gaban is being so hard on Luffy is more likely because he knows this is exactly how to get to him. During the earlier encounter in Oro's castle fighting over Loki's key, Gaban witnessed that Luffy is someone very competitive. This is likely why he's now decided to talk smack, which is all just to push Luffy to save this island. Or maybe Scopper is in fact being genuine, and he's always been on Team Bucky to get the One Piece. While chewing Luffy out, Gaban reveals what he thinks it truly means to be a pirate king, but this is a definition the story has never used before. Gaban subscribes to the idea that a pirate king is someone whose death is celebrated because everyone in the world is aiming for their throne. On the surface though, this definition is not that different from the emperors of the sea. The emperors are people most in the world also want to see eliminated, whose thrones most pirates want to claim, but whose deaths have also been shown being celebrated worldwide. This is also not just the emperors, but the One Piece world has been shown rejoicing at the downfalls of even lesser pirates. Yet Gaban still treats the Pirate King as an entirely different entity compared to all other pirates. So, what is the difference? There is something noteworthy Gaban said here, which connects to something the manga has previously shown puts the Pirate King at the zenith of piracy, far beyond even the emperors. But this is a topic best used for its own video, which you may see later on this channel, but Swordpiece has been too inactive lately for his word to be trusted. Back with this chapter, Gaban refers to Gear 5 as Luffy's white form. These are words he also used when first seeing this power earlier in the arc. Because Gaban has inside knowledge from Laugh Tale about the Nika Devil Fruit, this could be a hint that there's more to Luffy's awakening than just Gear 5. Many depictions of Nika have only been shown as silhouettes, which may be a covert way for the story to hide the form having colors other than white. Another possible hint of this came from the Elbaf children's drawings, which showed Nika in darker colors, that the anime recently depicted as being blue. The One Piece manga has for a long time played around with the idea of Luffy having different colored forms in the cover pages, but the cover pages have also many times foreshadowed things that later appeared in the actual story. All these points could be set up for Luffy's future transformation that isn't white, whether this be Gear 6 or another variant of Gear 5. Considering how long the final saga is going to take, it is very unlikely that Luffy had his last definitive power-up in Wano. Go watch this video. Gaban's knowledge of forbidden history is the real centerpiece of this chapter. He introduces himself to Imu as the man who understands the world, with his dialogue being full of hints about the many secrets that he's aware of. So, what are all of these hints? First, Kaban calls Imu's current form hideous and not of this world. While it's possible that Kaban has just been spending too much time with Zoro, this scene may give credence to the idea that Imu's form on Elbaf is not his real body. Because Kaban is pretty much the most well-traveled character in One Piece, he should know if Imu's current form revealed him to be one of the Blue Planet's races. Maybe this form is Imu using some weird One Piece equivalent of a video game character creator, giving himself the coolest traits of races like the Giants and the Lunarians. Next, Kaban reveals that he knows Luffy reminds him of Joy Boy. Just like Imu, Kaban himself does not see Luffy as Joy Boy. This further clarifies that even though some characters have called Luffy by Joy Boy's name, they are two different people. Kaban is not personally that invested in Joy Boy's connection with Luffy, but simply believes him to be the man who will fulfill Roger's dream, only seeing Imu's attempts to get rid of Luffy as confirmation that he's the one. This is all a reference to a mysterious storyline of the man Roger is waiting for. This was something first mentioned back in the Reverse Mountain arc 27 years ago, when Crocus said his farewells to the Straw Hats. Later, this same idea has been repeated by other characters who also went to Laugh Tale, as well as by Whitebeard, to whom Roger had revealed everything in their final meeting. But this chapter also reveals that there is another who may be aware that Roger was waiting for someone, and it is Shanks. In case you are here for the topic presented in the title, the video will get to it after this following section. Shanks never went to Laugh Tale but stayed behind with Buggy, because the latter got sick with something called "Do Not Go to That Island" disease. After returning from the final island, Roger also told Shanks something that made him cry. To date, the story has never truly confirmed just how much Shanks knows about what Roger learned when he found the One Piece, including that Roger may have been waiting for Luffy. When Shanks as an adult talked to Rayleigh, he simply described Luffy as a kid who'd said the exact same words as their captain. When Whitebeard asks Shanks why he'd lost his arm, Shanks says that he'd simply bet it on the next generation. Neither of these points conveniently confirm or deny that Shanks knew Luffy to be the second coming of Joy Boy, but there have been hints that he does know. After seeing Luffy's Gear 5 form on his bounty poster, Shanks not only looks at the image with a knowing face, but this also makes him think of how he'd originally stolen this fruit. This latest chapter seems to finally confirm that Shanks did in fact know that there was someone Roger was waiting for, but also that this person was very likely Luffy. This puts all of Shanks' prior scenes in the story in a new light. In hindsight, it is easy to understand how Shanks would know this. The scene where Roger originally said that someone not yet born was going to surpass him was after he'd returned from Laugh Tale, but by this point, Shanks was back on the ship, so he would have only had to have been within earshot when Roger said this. Because Shanks didn't go to Laugh Tale, he might however not know the full truth of the world, but may have a much more vague understanding of Roger's dream than the other characters on this page. This could explain why Shanks, despite everything, still wants the One Piece for himself. Shanks did not just decide this right before the final saga, but he's always wanted to go to Laugh Tale, both before Roger himself went there and even after Roger's death. The reason why Shanks is still so interested in Luffy is not because he wants Luffy to get the One Piece, but Shanks' big motive in this story is likely that he wants to compete for the treasure with the man Roger was waiting for. Joy Boy's own prophecy says that even he didn't know who would ultimately claim his treasure, but this is also repeated by Roger after he'd returned from Laugh Tale. Basically, Luffy is only destined to be the second coming of Joy Boy, but he is not destined to get the One Piece itself, which is actually up for anyone to take. Like Luffy, the story is also hinting that Shanks too may have his very own inherited destiny. One other scene that indicates that Shanks wants to compete with Joy Boy and Roger's heir over the treasure is that he in the past was also thrilled at the idea that Ace could be the next Pirate King, despite Shanks at this point having already decided that he personally was going to get the title. This page has the first canonical appearance of Oden since the Wano arc. If this page represents Kaban's inner thoughts, this may be a reference to the manga's several allusions that Kaban and Oden formed a special friendship during the year the latter spent on the Oro Jackson. Kaban was a crying mess when Oden left the crew, but even 20 years later, he's still wearing a Wano-style straw hat and talking about wanting to go back to the island. If Kaban and Oden shared this kind of a bond, this would also add another layer to Kaban's affection for Luffy, as Luffy was the man who finally avenged Oden's death. The final thing Kaban brings up during his fight with Imu is that he may be aware of Imu's personal history with Joy Boy. Imu tells Kaban that he fights well for an old man, but that this is to be expected of the Pirate King's crew. Kaban, however, replies that he could say the same about Imu. While this could be a reference to Imu simply being old like Kaban, there could be a double meaning here. Kaban may not only be referring to Imu having been on Joy Boy's crew, but that Joy Boy also held the title of Pirate King. Joy Boy having been the first Pirate King would make a lot of sense. He was not only the world's first pirate, but Joy Boy's accolades also well surpass what Roger did to become the king of the pirates. While Roger circumnavigated the world, Joy Boy led the Great Kingdom in a global war, which lasted for 100 years and tore the world asunder. Roger fought Rox, Garp, and the future emperors of the sea, but Joy Boy's rivals were people who held true world power. Joy Boy was a more formidable pirate than Gold D. Roger, but this might only be half of the story, as the manga is also setting up Joy Boy as a more tragic figure than Roger, who in truth may have never become his era's pirate king. At the end of the Egghead arc, when Emmet talks to Luffy, he says a cryptic line that he failed to make Joy Boy king. There are some interpretations of what this line means. Pirate King is not the only king title in One Piece, but Emmet in this scene could instead be saying that he wanted to make Joy Boy the king of the world, or perhaps alternatively, the king of the Great Kingdom. Yet the most likely answer of what Emmet meant is that he wanted to make Joy Boy the Pirate King. In One Piece, all other king titles except Pirate King are the titles of people who rule. Yet ruling is also an idea both Luffy and Roger completely reject. While other pirates like Kaido and Big Mom want both to be the Pirate King and to rule the world, what the Pirate King title itself only means is that its holder is seen as the greatest pirate. But there are many paths to the top. Even though the pirates of the current era are trying to get the crown by building up their empires, Roger himself became the Pirate King despite all accounts having 0 fleets or territories under his flag. For Luffy personally, Pirate King likewise does not mean having your own pirate empire, but being the freest man on the seas. It is also very likely that this aversion to ruling is something Joy Boy had in common with both Luffy and Roger. It is no secret that there is some mystical connection between these three men, beyond just the straw hat, as Luffy is frequently revealed to possess both the same kind of personality and mannerisms as Roger and Joy Boy. But the big hint that Joy Boy was also someone with no desire to rule is that the story has now set up an antithesis character for him in Davy D. Jones. While still a man of mystery, if Jones's story is to be believed, he may be the true creator of the world government and a pirate who ruled the world. This seems to be backed up by the fact that in the current story, Blackbeard has been revealed as the second coming of Davy Jones. But just like his forefather, Teach wants to take over this planet. The best evidence that this was the opposite of the kind of pirate Joy Boy wanted to be may come from Whitebeard, who in his last words said that Blackbeard would be the last person Roger was waiting for. So, while this took a while, what all of this indicates is that just like Roger and Luffy, Joy Boy would not be interested in any crown other than the king of the pirates. But there is even more evidence than just Emmet's words that he never got it. After Roger himself had found the One Piece, there is a scene where he reacts to the news of the world declaring him the Pirate King. Roger does not, however, react to the news as if he'd just gotten the same title as Joy Boy, but he's instead surprised, as if he'd never heard of this title before in his life. Roger simply says, "Kaisoku otte no wa waruku ne na," meaning, Pirate King, not bad. This scene may connect to something Rayleigh had already revealed about Roger during Sabaody, which was that Roger actually loved being called the Pirate King, not because the title had any special meaning to it, but simply because it was flashy and exciting. This scene may also be a cute reference to just how much Buggy emulates his foster father, but this still does not answer the question. If Joy Boy truly was a more formidable figure than even Roger, why did the world of his time not recognize Joy Boy as the Pirate King? This could be because the story has presented the Pirate King title as an accolade that changes from era to era. Roger did not in truth get the title for finding the One Piece, but people started calling him the Pirate King for his circumnavigation. After Roger's death, the definition changed again, with the next Pirate King simply being the person who would find Roger's treasure. It could be that being the Pirate King also meant something different during the Void Century. It has already been revealed that the world of Joy Boy's time was very different, where the One Piece world was not the water world it is today. Piracy at this point was also still in its infancy, as Joy Boy himself was the first pirate according to Vegapunk. It could also be that the standards for Joy Boy being seen as the king of the pirates were simply much higher during the Void Century, because Joy Boy had to compete with the likes of Davy Jones. The people who lived in this time may have simply not been able to unanimously decide who the greatest living pirate was. This is not that different from Luffy. Compared to Roger, Luffy also has to go through a much harder path, as he has to become Pirate King during a world war, when every other pirate of note is also gunning for the title. Roger himself seemed to realize that he was a lesser man than Joy Boy and the next Pirate King, as Roger admitted that he'd both wanted to live during the Void Century and that his successor was going to surpass him. The evidence points to Joy Boy not having been the king of the pirates, but having died in the attempt to become one. Yet, what if Roger was also not the first Pirate King? The story has never truly referred to Roger as the first person to hold this title. In the chapter where he gets it, the narrator calls the event the birth of the Pirate King, but in both English and Japanese, this exact word in the manga has also been used when characters talk about the next Pirate King after Roger. Maybe Pirate King was simply the title the world came up with 25 years ago for Roger, or maybe someone like Big News Morgans coined it in his newspaper, but it could also be a much older historical title that has been used before. While Roger is said to have the highest bounty of any pirate in history, the story has hinted that there may have been many more fearsome pirates than him in the past. Not only has the world government erased many of the records regarding pirates like Davy D. Jones and Rox D. Sebek, but the story has also now introduced the concept of inflation, meaning that there may be ancient bounties of long-dead pirates who in truth well surpass Roger when adjusted in value. But we might even know some of these mythical pirates who may have held the crown before Roger. This latest chapter hints that Roger was the first D-clan member with the title, which likely means that neither Jones or Sebek was ever the king of the pirates. But there are a few other interesting candidates the story has name-dropped through the years. One is Binks. Binks is someone only mentioned in the eponymous song, Binks Sake, sung by pirates all over the One Piece world. The song was apparently created long ago, as even Brook thought it was old. While the idea of a random pirate mentioned in a song back in Thriller Bark turning out to be an ancient pirate king may sound far-fetched, this is something that has happened before, as Davy Jones's only presence in the story also for decades was just a couple panels shown in the pre-time skip. But Binks is not the only mysterious figure left in the story. When Imu fought Loki, he mentioned someone called Do-san. This is the first time this name has ever been brought up in the manga, but this scene already sets him up as a force. Imu says that Do-san was a threat comparable to Loki and Luffy, and someone who could not be allowed to live. Imu mentioning him here could hint that Do-san was someone from after the Void Century, as otherwise, it is odd why Imu chose to bring him up over Joy Boy or Jones, when thinking of pirates like Luffy and Loki that had to be eliminated. Besides Binks and Do-san, there are some other possible candidates for Roger's predecessor as the Pirate King. Elbaf has been referred to as a nation of pirates, but according to Shamrock, its warriors at some point in the past conquered the entire New World. This would make Elbaf the most powerful pirate empire known in the story, meaning that the giants may in this time have also produced their own pirate king. But another race that could have done this are the Buccaneers. Not only is the very name of this race a reference to pirates, but the Buccaneers are said to have committed a great crime against the world in the past, which is the reason why they are being hunted down and persecuted. This is the exact same kind of witch hunt that the world government also did against all of Roger's possible descendants, which could be a sly hint that the Buccaneer race's ancestor was likewise a king of the pirates. So, there are a lot of possibilities over who could have been the Pirate King before Roger. Whether or not the manga ever uses this idea remains to be seen, but if it ever came time to fully introduce someone like Binks to the story, it's hard to come up with a more grand reveal than them having held the same title as Gold D. Roger. I alluded to this before, but this chapter also finally answers why the world government decided to change Roger's name before his death. While some D-clan members willingly hide the initial, Roger to date is the only confirmed case of the government censoring the D from someone's name, but it was never explained why. It turns out that there is no grand reason, but it was just Imu being petty. Imo had simply disliked the idea of someone from the D clan being called the king of the pirates, and turned Roger's name into Gold Roger. Fan speculation about there being a special reason why Roger's name was changed has existed for years, but while very simple, this reveal is ultimately consistent with Imu's character. Despite being a centuries-old evil mastermind, Imu is also very petulant and does many of his actions on a whim. This was for example seen when he decided to unveil his super weapon to destroy Lulusia, but there was yet again no special reason why Imu chose this country, other than it being close. Imu had also apparently wanted to remove the D from Luffy's name after he'd awakened the Nika fruit, a decision that he in hindsight likely also made on a whim, as Imu has now revealed that he in truth does not believe Luffy to be Joy Boy. Imu wanting certain D-clan members' names removed may also connect to a scene after Marineford, when Saint Venus Truro says that out of all of their problems, the biggest was the rising prominence of the D-clan. As the warrior god of finance, Ethan was probably very peeved about how much it would take out of the budget to bribe Morgans if Imu-sama decided that another D had to be censored. Ethan may have also been indirectly referenced in this latest chapter. Imu conjures another founding weapon to attack Kaban, which is a sword themed around real-life Japan. The likelihood that this is the founding weapon of House Ethan Baron is very high, as Saint Venus Churro is the only celestial dragon in the story with this Eastern/Japanese theme to him. This scene is another in a long line of the world government's connections to real-world Japan. This may not however mean that the government has any particular relation to Mono country, as these kinds of Japanese references are also seen all throughout the One Piece world. Besides Kaban, Imu is essentially the secondary vocal point of this chapter, with multiple new details being revealed about him. Before Kaban has even landed a single attack, Imu is already shown coughing. This likely hints at the toll being so long outside Pangaea Castle is taking on Imu's body, as was shown when he was already bleeding when landing on Elbaf. The damage Imu is incurring on this island may be set up for his later defeat once he returns to the Holy Land. This kind of cumulative damage is how One Piece generally likes to take out its strongest characters, but this could also be a fitting way for Imu to fall. The entire reason Imu put himself in danger by going to Elbaf was because he's so obsessed with the prophecy of the final war, but he may have indirectly started his own downfall with this action, making it a self-fulfilling prophecy, just like what happened before when the government tried to stop Luffy's awakening, which actually ended up doing the opposite. A surprising thing revealed about Imu in this chapter is that he did not know who Skopor Kaban was. This is a bit shocking, because Imu has shown knowledge of much less known pirates like Dory and Broggy, but has also even managed to recognize Brook. One explanation could be that Imu simply did not first realize who Kaban was, as he's been inactive for decades and looks considerably different as an old man than he did in his prime. Another explanation is that Imu may have a special reason for the characters he takes notice of. So far, Imu has mostly only taken interest in D-clan members and in the warriors of Elbaf. Brook is an exception to this, but Brook is also someone Imu had met personally. Besides Brook, the only other exception seems to be Sabo, but like Brook, Sabo and Imu have also met, and it makes sense why this is an encounter Imu would remember. So, Kaban should not take Imu not knowing him too personally. Imu may simply be someone who only really cares about the D. On the final page of this chapter, Usopp yet again displays his observation haki to sense the fight between Imu and Kaban, after which Kaban himself is shown being defeated and missing an arm. This scene has a strong connection to Shanks, who had also lost his left arm protecting Luffy. The similarity is so apparent that it may even be deliberate, because Kaban's goal is to snap Luffy back into the fight. This may mean that he knowingly sacrificed his left arm, knowing that this is what Shanks had also done for him. While he is currently still alive, the chances of Kaban dying here are still high, as he has now not only revealed who he is to Imu, but has also said and done a lot of things that are known to aggravate him. However, there are also a lot of characters present who might rescue Kaban. Perhaps this is the moment that Eustace Kid finally makes his grand return, turning Imu into a magnet and coming to the rescue of his fellow amputee. The cover page of this chapter is a fan request of Shanks cooking breakfast with Luffy in Fusha village. Despite this being the place where the story started, the manga has only ever shown a few glimpses of Shanks and Luffy's time together. Shanks was not simply visiting Luffy's hometown in chapter 1, but says that he'd stayed there for an entire year. A flashback that shows everything that happened during this year may be something the manga is saving for the very end of the story. If you can't wait that long, however, you should click here to watch one of my videos on the secret reason why Shanks, despite already being a world-renowned pirate at the time, decided to wait this long on Luffy's island. Thank you to all my members, old and new, for their support. I'll make no promises about frequent content, so I suggest everyone just judge the channel based on its output. Final thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end.